All right, welcome everybody to the second episode of the Bears Pod. This is your host Parker Hurley from beargoggleson.com. I'm the site editor over there. Go check out everything that I'm doing over there. Like I said, this is the second episode. We had Scott Kennedy on with the last episode. It's me flying solo tonight. We're going to figure out what we're going to do moving forward. It's going to be me flying solo, maybe a little bit of Scott, maybe a little bit of a couple guests, some of my guys from Bear Goggles on and things like that. So we're going to plan things out moving forward. We're here on Thursday evening. This is going to typically be a Tuesday and Thursday thing. We were on Monday last week. It's Tuesday and Thursday now, starting this Thursday. We should be on next Tuesday. 6 Eastern, 5 Central. So tune in then next Tuesday. It'll be the next time we're on here. But we're kicking it off here. This is the second episode. Like I said, I'm going solo, but I'm excited for it, especially because it's Combine week, and everybody knows this is a huge week for just so many reasons when you think about it. There's the coaches are there, the GMs are there, the medical staffs are there, the rumors start swirling, the prospects start swirling. And for the Chicago Bears, we have I would say multiple very specific things. So like I said, follow me at Bear Goggles On, at Parker Hurley, and follow the pod, Bears Pod. But we're going to get right into it with Combine Week. And the biggest thing, first off, was Ryan Poles meeting with the media along with Matt Eberflus. We talked about it last episode. So many questions in terms of what are the Chicago Bears going to do with the number 1 overall pick? Or are they going to trade Justin Fields? Is that they could go one way or the other? You would assume if they stay at number 1, they probably have to take a quarterback. Are they going to go up to number 1 and not take a quarterback? Probably not. So do they trade back? Ryan Poles was met with tons of questions. He answered most of them. The vibe from not only Ryan Poles, but Matt Eberflus was Justin Fields is the Chicago Bears quarterback, not only probably for next season, but not only that, they would assume for the foreseeable future. So that was the vibe. The thing that Ryan Poles said, and he said it in his exit interview at the end of the season, he said the words blown away. We would have to be blown away. If we're going to move on from Justin Fields, we're going to have to be blown away to do that. He said the same thing at the Combine. He said, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to be blown away. And the reality is, from that point when he said it at the end of the season to the Combine, they obviously haven't been blown away yet. This is obviously the time. One, this is lying season. So is Ryan Poles lying about saying that he's sticking with Justin Fields potentially? 2, this is the time where he gets the medicals. Does somebody blow him away that way? Does somebody blow him away watching him throw in person? Does somebody blow him away with the interviews? There's still time for Ryan Poles to be blown away. So I don't think you could necessarily even say Ryan Poles is lying based off of what he was saying at the NFL Combine media. But I think the vibe that you got from Ryan Poles was that he's invested in Justin Fields, that he saw enough from Justin Fields. And I think the bigger thing beyond Ryan Poles is head coach Matt Eberflus. I think what you saw from Matt Eberflus was saying, not only was he saying that we're invested in Justin Fields, we'd have to be blown away to change directions. Matt Eberflus was getting specific into details of where he expects Justin Fields to improve, where he has Justin Fields, moving forward with their plans and things of that nature. So he's not only talking about, similar to something along the lines of Josh Rosen, and everybody says, the quote, I think it was Cliff Kingsbury says, Josh Rosen is our guy. And they tweeted, he's our guy. It was well beyond just Justin Fields is our guy. It was, we like what Justin Fields does in these specific areas. We need Justin Fields to improve in these specific areas. So when you overall look at it, they were much more specific. They were much more understanding of where they need him to grow. And one of the biggest things I took away from it was Matt Eberflus saying that Justin Fields, we love the way he's a playmaker. We love the way he scrambles. We love the way he creates these 60-yard runs in the red zone, on third down, when we need him to. But on first and second down, we really want Justin Fields to be a game manager. We want him to take the easy yards and to put himself into where it's not 3rd and 9 and he has to scramble for 50 or 60. And they say, we like when he does it on third down, but we don't like when he does it on first and second down. And on first and second down, we want him to be a little bit more easy going and more taking what's given to him and things like that. So you think about it and you say, if Matt Eberflus is digging this far into the specifics with Justin Fields, it's pretty obvious that they're invested in him moving forward. So some of the other quick notes I think that you could take away from specifically both of them, honestly, was Eddie Jackson. A lot of people were wondering what's going to happen with Eddie Jackson. He's got like they could save about $10 million of salary cap space. This isn't the regime that drafted Eddie Jackson. He's going to be 30 years old. He's coming off of a serious ankle injury. Are the Chicago Bears looking to trade? Are they looking to release? What are they trying to do with Eddie Jackson? They made it sound like this is not even a debate. Eddie Jackson's on the roster. Ryan Poles said something along the lines of, we can't wait to check in with him at camp, or things like that. We're going to see how his ankle's progressing, and we hope that he's going to be on the field by training camp for us. So they were, they're not even sidelining. They're not saying we'll see anything along those lines. They're saying Eddie Jackson is our guy. We're sticking with Eddie Jackson. So it's pretty obvious. Not only did Ryan Poles say that we're going to see him in camp, Matt Eberflus said that we thought the way of anybody that was from this past team, of anybody that, bought into the coaching, was a real leader in the locker room, was one of our guys with being somebody that we inherited. It was Eddie Jackson. So both of them were super optimistic about Eddie Jackson and what they think that he can be. So that's obviously good. Another small note, Ryan Poles talked vehemently about adding offensive linemen. He said the room isn't going to look the same or nearly the same as what it did just last season or anything like that. So you say, well, they got Tevin Jenkins at right guard. They got Braxton Jones at left tackle. And there's probably 3 other spots that you think that the Chicago Bears could easily move on or upgrade from. So the way that Ryan Poles talked about it, the way that you just look at the roster and you say, maybe they have a left guard and a left tackle and a right guard. They really don't have any other spots. You start looking at that and you say, okay, they're going to be serious in terms of free agency. And not only that, they could add 3 guys who could be listed as starters, and then still with, a second or third round pick, adding offensive linemen. And then still on day 3, we saw Ryan Poles trade back multiple times and, 3 6th round picks. He takes, 3 guys. One of them turns into a starter, 2 or 6th round picks. One's on the practice squad, one's on another team. But when you take 3 shots in the 6th round, and those are the odds that you're getting, those are the things that Ryan Poles likes to do. So you could see a large list of offensive linemen, not only from 3 free agents, 3 or 4 draft picks. I think the big thing that they're going to do is not move on from a quarterback, but they're going to be very active in the offensive line. And then the last takeaway that I had from Ryan Poles was David Montgomery. I don't think there's really no traction in terms of getting a contract done. And this is the exact opposite of his view and of his comments compared to Eddie Jackson. He talked about, we're going to see Eddie Jackson. We thought that Eddie Jackson bought in. We thought this and that. With David Montgomery, it was, hey, we'll see. And I know that Eddie Jackson is signed and David Montgomery is not, and it's a completely different dynamic in that regard. But there was we started contract talks with David Montgomery. There was we would like to bring David Montgomery back. It was more along the lines of, we have the number 1 pick to deal with. We have Justin Fields to deal with. We have the offensive line to deal with. We have an entire defensive line to deal with. And then we'll see about David Montgomery. If we fix all those things in a month from now, David Montgomery's still on the free agency market. Maybe then we'll deal with David Montgomery. So I think if you're a Chicago Bears fan, and I know David Montgomery is a huge, a fan favorite, I think the fans that bought his jersey and things of that nature, I think, at least the running back market is strong, and he may not get a good offer and he may circle back around. But how many times do you see a guy head to the market and he's not coming back? So you would assume, I don't think David Montgomery is going to come back. So that's one of the biggest things I took away, or at least if he does come back, it's not going to be before free agency. I think the Bears have a lot of things to deal with before free agency, and they could get a cheap running back. They have Khalil Herbert. I don't think David Montgomery is high on their list. So, trading the number 1 pick, and Ryan Poles said, we may trade this before free agency because we may want to get a player back by trading for number 1, and that fills a free agency hole. So we may be active trading. So they're going to be in talks right now. They're not talking to David Montgomery. And like I said, they said that no talks have started. So it doesn't seem very likely that the Chicago Bears are going to be keeping David Montgomery. So that'll be a big thing. And as we switch gears here, I'm going to take a sip of drink real quick. But everybody, if I see a couple people starting to come in, hit like, hit subscribe, give us a couple super chats. Like I said, this is episode 2 of the Bears Pod. Excited to be here. We just talked some Ryan Poles. We just talked really my 5 biggest takeaways from his combine interview and Matt Eberflus's combine interview. Beyond those 2, the biggest thing to take away from the NFL combine is Jalen Carter. And I think everybody's heard the story by now. 2 misdemeanors, reckless driving, racing. that resulted in, a very serious manner, the death of a Georgia player and a staffer. So you obviously can't brush that over. He turned himself in. He reported back to the combine. He missed a lot of the interviews, but an interesting thought was, I think it was Scott Fitterer of the Panthers said, we interviewed Jalen Carter and we didn't even know about the situation. The news didn't break when we interviewed him, and we didn't talk to Jalen Carter about that. So what's fascinating about this situation to me is general managers in the NFL are just as, they're in information gathering mode, or they're just as clueless, or they're just as questioning as we are here. So this Jalen Carter thing is going to be fascinating and obviously impacts the Chicago Bears. Me and Scott were just on an episode just last week, and we were saying, if you had to debate and you're the Chicago Bears who have the number one pick, and potentially, let's say they trade back to 2 with the Texans and the Texans take a quarterback, or we said, let's say they trade back to 4 and it goes quarterback, the Cardinals take somebody. Are you comfortable there, with Jalen Carter or Will Anderson? And we both said, when you look at the tape, you would probably prefer Jalen Carter. When you look at the scheme with the Chicago Bears, you would probably prefer Jalen Carter. Here's a huge wrench in terms of, in terms of everything, because like I said, if Scott Fitterer went out to the media and said, I was just as blindsided as, the regular public, who else is going to be just as blindsided? Who else is having the same exact questions that Scott Fitterer had? Ryan Poles with the number one pick. And, Fitterer may have to deal with that if Jalen Carter falls. Ryan Poles has to deal with that right this very second. Like I said, he's debating, do I move back to 4? Because if I move back to 4, I could still get Jalen Carter. Now, if you move back to 4, and you miss out on Will Anderson, are you missing out on a tier? Or do you have Wilson there? Or do you have somebody else there? What do you do here? It becomes interesting. But like we kind of talked about, me and Scott talked about pre-show, the way this media cycle moves and the way that, the way that things just keep going, this could get blown over by the NFL draft. Do the Chicago Bears stick with the idea of, we could take Jalen Carter. He was just a kid. This was just a mistake. And here we have Scott chiming in. He thinks the Colts pick's going to be less valuable because he thinks that it could have, Carter out of the top 5. And he says you don't want to miss, if Carter's out of the top 5, you don't want to miss out on both of them. I agree with that. And I think that all of a sudden now, maybe there's a chance that the Cardinals pick becomes the pick that you value, because you say, okay, we're going to dare the Bears to pick at number 1 because we know they're not going to pick a quarterback. And then you say, and we know that it's going to go quarterback at number 2. So who do the Bears take at number 1 if we force them to stay? And then, like you said, all of a sudden the Colts are sitting there. Does somebody want to jump the Indianapolis Colts and get in that Arizona Cardinal spot, knowing that if we force the Bears to, force their hand, and if we force the Texans to force their hand, all of a sudden 3 becomes the number 1 pick de facto in that regard, because there is that only one player sitting there. It becomes interesting. And then I know the NFL Combine is going on right now, like we talked about. The early takeaway is some of the things we were questioning with Will Anderson. Well, is he going to be 230, 240? Well, he was 255. If he still has the same athleticism, if he still has the same agilities, if he still has the same burst and broad jump at 255, and somebody said he checks the length measurables that you would typically have from a 4.3, outside defensive end, maybe then you're looking at, maybe Will Anderson fits the Chicago Bears. Maybe he does fit that prototypical defensive end slot. So that's going to be another thing that, this team's going to have to debate. And then Scott says, he may not, or maybe he's not willing to trade back as far in the draft and pick even more. The thought that I would have is, I would potentially be saying, the Falcons, or, the Panthers, one of those teams, saying, okay, there's a chance that Jalen Carter falls all the way to me. I wanted Jalen Carter at 4. What if Jalen Carter falls to me at 8 or 9 and I pick up an extra, the difference between 4 and 9, could be a massive amount. All of a sudden that becomes in play if you're the Chicago Bears here. So I think that's another way to look at it. 4.69 unofficial for him. Right, you are willing to move further back. I completely agree with that. Yeah, and I think the big thing I'm interested in for Will Anderson, and I don't think anybody's had their 3 cones and agilities and things like that, because I think we talked about the bend and that ability to get around the edge. You see him. I think he's a power player, and we thought maybe he's a little undersized to be a power player. To put his to have a pretty good speed. I don't think, that wasn't blowing away, but I think for his size at 256 to put on some weight and put on a decent, respectable combine, 40, I think that's good. But if you see him check that box of the three cone with that edge, and you say, okay, maybe there's more untapped potential. Maybe he was playing a little bit, too inside of the tackle at Alabama because they focus on defending the run more than they focus on, defending the pass in college. You could think about that and say, because of I think if Jalen Carter, we talked about it, if Jalen Carter doesn't have these questions, I think it's such a simpler decision. Now I think you're in information gathering mode. I think, like I said, not only the law, I think the thing you have to look into is what type of person is Jalen Carter, because Todd McShay had those quotes about Jalen Carter, and people said those quotes that Todd McShay had about Jalen Carter came, in December, and then he had this car wreck in January. Does that mean that Todd McShay was still making up those concerns about him? Or was Todd McShay saying, this isn't a rare occurrence for, Jalen Carter? This isn't, this one rare Saturday night Jalen Carter was out. No, this is something that you probably could have seen coming because it's a habitual thing with his attitude, with his demeanor, all those things. I think, like I said, if you're the Chicago Bears, you're in information gathering mode from, here moving forward. And I don't think you can say anything definitive. One, we don't necessarily know the legal implications, although we assume nothing's going to be added to these misdemeanors at this point. But we don't know the full legal ramifications. We also don't know, other than what's reported, we don't know everything that, the police knows, everything that everybody knows about, what he did because of, the story is just so fresh in everybody's mind. So there's still, between now and the NFL draft, there's still so much to come out. But between that, and then you look at Will Anderson, potentially Will Anderson's answering more questions, whereas Jalen Carter is now adding more questions. You start to say, does this become more of a debate? Or like Scott, and I completely agree. You look at a team like, okay, we wanted just to go back to the Colts at 4. The Colts pick isn't as valuable now. The Cardinals pick is valuable now. But like I said, I think it's like 7, 8, and 9. You get like the Panthers and the Falcons and, one other team sitting there where I think all of the Raiders, I think it's the Raiders, Panthers, and Falcons. You could make a case for all of them if they really want that guy. And then if you're the Chicago Bears, maybe you prefer Tyree Wilson and you think he could fall. But something we're going to, kind of switch gears and talk about here. And yeah, definitely hit like, hit subscribe, send us a super chat. If you guys want to, control the conversation with a comment here as I'm going to take a drink. But the reality, like we said, the Jalen Carter news doesn't just affect what they do at number 1 overall. It doesn't just affect Will Anderson versus Jalen Carter, the debate. The Chicago Bears were hit with some news, like we talked about. They're looking for a 3 technique. They Matt Eberflus got one into DeForest Buckner with the Colts and traded a first round pick because he sees that as a key of his defense. They tried to pay Larry Ogunjobi, didn't work out. There were reports that they were interested in Logan Hall, and he got drafted a few picks before them, didn't work out. They signed Justin Jones. He's kind of was because they had to pivot from Larry Ogunjobi so quick. They signed Justin Jones. All season, Chicago Bears fans are talking about really 2 guys, Jalen Carter and DaRon Payne. Do we sign DaRon Payne and we could draft Will Anderson, or we just draft Jalen Carter? I would say in like the last 48 to 72 hours, you could argue, that Bears plan A and plan B are, off of the board. Or like I said, I wouldn't put Jalen Carter off of the Chicago Bears board yet, because 1, they could trade down to 7 through 9 and still get Jalen Carter. 2, there's still so much to play out. I can't definitively say Jalen Carter to the Chicago Bears isn't going to happen. We can pretty definitively say DaRon Payne to the Chicago Bears isn't going to happen. DaRon Payne was franchise tagged, which means that the Bears could still trade for him. I don't see it, because when you look at the Bears, they have all the cap space in the world. They just don't have the draft picks right now. When they trade back from number 1, assuming they trade back from number 1, they're going to get, equity. And that's Ryan Poles keeps saying, I want to trade this pick before free agency. I want to trade this pick as soon as possible because I think it's going to affect our free agency plans. Absolutely, because how many picks are you going to get? Because right now they have nothing to trade for DaRon Payne. They traded the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool. That pick is gone. And they luckily got a 2nd round pick for Roquan Smith, which made them, more trigger happy to go get Chase Claypool. that pick is still, it's outside the top 50. So they pick first, then they pick 55th. You're really looking at this situation saying, I don't see it here. And we do have a comment here from Archie Dragon. He says, if Will Anderson has as good career as Willie Anderson, the Bears should just draft him. I mean, absolutely. And you think about, if the Bears are looking to build their defense, they have to build it with the defensive line. And if Will Anderson, like I said, he's answering more questions than Jalen Carter is, like I said, if teams start to say, okay, let's see let's see let's see the Texans. Let's see who they take it to. Let's force the Bears to take someone at 1, and then 3 becomes the prime spot. If that happens and the Bears are forced to pick at 1, you do take Will Anderson. You just have to sit there and take him. Like I said, maybe you trade back to 7 and you still get Jalen Carter. Maybe Jalen Carter answers enough questions, but like he said, it's very easy to see Will Anderson, coming in here, and like I said, he's answering way more questions than Jalen Carter is right now. So let's say they draft Will Anderson, or let's say they're far more interested in Will Anderson. Who do they go to? Like I said, DaRon Payne was really the next thought. Or it was, do you go DaRon Payne? Do you go Jalen Carter? If they're both gone, what do you do? And like I said, if you're the Chicago Bears, it all hinges on you've got to trade back, because then you're stuck at 56. And I already said they were hoping to get Logan Hall at number 39, and he didn't even fall to 39. So if you really like somebody, do you really think that they're going to fall to 56? Probably not. Why didn't Carter come out last year? I think he's a true junior right now. I think this is his first year of eligibility. So, and a lot of people were saying at this point last season, this is the number 1 overall pick next season. That was the debate at that point last season, and people were saying, you're all wowed by Jordan Davis, who went 13th overall by the Eagles. If you're all wowed by Jordan Davis, just wait till you see the kid who's younger than him, outplaying him. And the other question with Jalen Carter is he's not working out at the NFL Combine. You wonder if he would have changed his mind. I don't know his injury status, but I think part of the reason he doesn't work out at the NFL Combine is, we talked about it. There's Will Anderson, Jalen Carter. There's really not another, people are hinting at Tyree Wilson. I think it's Will Anderson and Jalen Carter at this point. What does Jalen Carter have to prove? What does Jalen Carter have to prove? Why does Jalen Carter need to work out? We know he's an athletic freak. We know this or that. Now, all of a sudden, there's millions of questions. And, what could have answered some of those questions is, well, at least Jalen Carter tested, like I said, last year at this time, Jordan Davis set the world on fire with his size, speed, everything like that. You assumed Jalen Carter was going to do the same exact thing this season. So just another question, because Jalen Carter didn't work out this offseason, adds to it. I'll take another drink here, but yeah, keep with the comments. We love it. And do not forget to hit like, hit subscribe, and send some super chats our way. Like I said, Jalen Carter, he is a true junior. He is on tape. We said it last week. I think he's the number 1 player. I think as much as Will Anderson is answering questions, I think on tape, you could still say Jalen Carter is the number 1 guy. Now that you're adding in so many questions, it brings into, what do the Chicago Bears do? I think you look at free agency. I think the biggest name right now, because of DaRon Payne being franchise tagged, because the Vikings said Dalvin Tomlinson isn't going anywhere, because you see names being, linked to their team left and right. I think the biggest name now would be Draymond Jones from the Denver Broncos. And there was a report that he's going to test free agency. And I think, when the rumors get swirling and things along those lines, I think the Broncos would really like to keep Draymond Jones. And I think he's a 3rd round pick for them, and he's, ascended so far, but I think he's looking at free agency, and I think the Broncos have a specific price tag for him. And I think he's looking at free agency. And like I said, the Chicago Bears have all the money and then some. They don't have draft picks to trade for players. They have money to throw at players. I think you're looking at, we had $20 million for DaRon Payne. We just set aside $20 million for DaRon Payne. Why don't we just send 18 for Draymond Jones? And that's, it's completely out of Denver Broncos price range, they're not necessarily interested in bringing back Draymond Jones. The biggest thing with Draymond Jones is you look at his sack production, and not necessarily, it hasn't been there recently, but you look at his athleticism, you look at his upside, and you look at the Vic Fangio defense. And I know Fangio wasn't there last season, but they ran a very similar defense. They didn't change much from the Fangio style. Compared to what the Chicago Bears do, like I said, with Matt Eberflus, and his whole entire defense centers around having a 3 technique rush up the field. I think in the Fangio defense, he was playing a little more 5 technique. In the Eberflus defense, I think he's going to play a little more 3 technique. I think he's going to rush up the field a little bit more. Like I said, I think the Broncos have a price for him, and they see his sack production, whereas the Bears see his potential sack production in a new role, and they like I said, they pay off the rocker for it compared to the Chicago Bears. And here we have another comment from Scott. He said they might franchise tag Draymond Jones if he doesn't take a contract. The tag and trade, and that's where I said, the good news about Draymond Jones is in a tag and trade scenario, it's not going to cost the same as DaRon Payne. I think, like I said, I think if Draymond Jones gets to free agency, or I think the Chicago Bears are dangling the free agency, over his head, saying, if you get to free agency, we'll pay you. When you get into the draft pick, this is where, like I said, Ryan Poles is, I wouldn't say pressing, but in some ways, and he said it would benefit him. It would benefit the Chicago Bears if they got a trade done for the number 1 overall pick before free agency starts. I want to say that's March 13th or 15th. Let's get a trade done before March 13th or 15th, so now we have assets. Now we have things. Now we just don't have the number, we're not trading the number 1 overall pick for DaRon Payne, let alone Draymond Jones. So, but when we trade back from number 1 to whatever, the pieces that we get back from this, are they in play? That's the next question. And it is the question of, does Draymond Jones get to free agency? Are the Bills or are the Broncos willing to franchise tag him? The same thing could be said with Zach Allen. I think he's one of the next players on that list of, if you miss out on Payne, if you miss out on Draymond Jones, Zach Allen, has been with J.J. Watt and the Arizona Cardinals in the past couple of seasons. He said he wouldn't pay Draymond that much money. Would I? I don't know if I would. I think the Chicago Bears would, is the easiest way to put it, And like I said, if you're the Chicago Bears, you have, you're not paying Russell Wilson this exorbitant contract. The money is there for you in a way that, like I said, like Scott said, at the franchise tag, maybe, you exclude him. But if he's in free agency, the Bears can put up a number that nobody else can. And if you're the Chicago Bears and you're sitting here desperate saying, like I said, strike 1, Larry Ogunjobi, strike 2, DaRon Payne, strike 3, Jalen Carter, you're that poker player tilting at the table, like I said, you're kind of tapping there saying, look, we need to, like, our defense centers around a 3 technique. If we how are we going to get one? You start looking and you say, if we have to overpay the best person available by X amount of $1 million, let's do it. Scott says he's a 12 to 14 million. And like I said, he may get more in free agency, despite the fact that I completely agree. I think he's a 12 to 14 million dollar a year guy. I think the Chicago Bears are sitting there saying, if he's a 12 to 14, let's pay 18. Because is $4 million going to stop us? Like, if we're the Chicago Bears with $100 million, is $4 million really going to stop us? What's that $4 million really going to do? He said they should let him go and get a compensatory pick. If you're going to get, like I said, this isn't even just $18 million. I think this is 4 years, $72 million. Why wouldn't the Bears pay it? Like I said, would I do it? I would be hesitant about it. Would the Chicago Bears do it because they're desperate and they're on plan D, E, strike 4, 5? I'm starting. This is the team that just traded they didn't know they were trading the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool, but they knew that Claypool had 1 year of salary left on his contract, and they traded a 2nd round pick for Chase Claypool, not based off of what he did, based off of what they think he can do in this specific offense. Like I said, I think you say, okay, Draymond Jones, maybe he's a $12 million a year guy in a Vic Fangio defense, but in the Matt Eberflus defense, we can turn a $12, $14 million a year guy into a $18, $20 million a year guy. And if we pay him $18 million, looks like an overpay right now. And then next year we're saying, The scheme change did wonders for Draymond Jones. Like I said, I think there's questions behind that. I'm explaining it through if you're the Chicago Bears and you need a three technique, and like I said, you have to convince yourself, like you have to figure this out in some regard. And you like I said, and you say, is $4 million the difference between us losing Draymond Jones and getting a potential three technique who may flourish in our scheme more than he just flourished? If you're the Bears, you have to say, like, let's do it. Let's do it, man. So the franchise tag is a huge question. Like I said, the same thing for Zach Allen, who I think the Bears would do the same thing. But that is it's going to be a huge question. And those were my three topics. I think we're gonna close it up here. We hit the 30-minute mark. I think there was some good conversation. Thank you so much, Aki Dragon, for bringing it in. Like I said, it's going to be fascinating to see as the Jalen Carter news, starts to move forward. So we'll wrap it up there. Like I said, follow me at beargoggleson.com. I'm the site expert over there. At Parker Hurley on Twitter. I'll be posting over there. I'll be on Twitter there. Like I said, we'll be back on Tuesday, hopefully 6 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Central. And we're going to start going Tuesdays and Thursdays, especially as free agency moves forward. And then as we head into the offseason, we'll see you there. But yeah, we'll see you guys on Tuesday. No problem, Aki, man. We'll see you guys. Hopefully you'll be here on Tuesday. We'll see you then. Yeah, logging off at Parker Hurley at Twitter.